Okay, so we're on our final section, and hopefully you've seen some of the other ones that we've recorded so far and haven't just jumped straight here. That's one of our main piece of advice. And in the spirit of iteration, I've gone ahead and changed my shirt for this video, and Steph is no longer joining us. We found that we can do this in a different way. And so I'll dive right in. Going back to the bicycle journey that we've been talking about this whole time. So where are we right now? We've started with the fundamentals, which is, figuring out where you are, what needs to be improved, what's going well, where you can double down, and where you want to go. We've defined the map in the fundamentals section. In elimination, we talked about, maybe you're on a rusty beach cruiser and there's a bicycle that's just not really working for you that much, and you got a monkey on your back and a backpack. Well, how do you start getting rid of those things that are preventing your life from being where it needs to be? And how do you do that in a way that makes sense and you can do slowly over time so that you don't get too overwhelmed? Then we move to automation, which is all about leveraging the power of the tools we have available today to get more out of your time and out of the things you do. This is about, translating things that you do repeatedly over and over into a code that works for you while you're sleeping, or that works alongside you as you're working. And so automation is about upgrading from a beach cruiser to an electric bike so that you can get further with everything you want to do. Then we talked a little bit about delegation, which is, how do you start working with other people? So automation is a form of delegation to a machine, and delegation is, moving tasks to another person. And maybe these are things that you've been doing a long time, and it's time for you to spend time on other things. Maybe these are things that are not bringing you value anymore, or they're really draining your energy. And so it'd be helpful for someone else who's better suited to do them, or who, just can take that off your plate to do them. So delegation is all about that. And again, it's about repeatable tasks. And the last step of our journey is iteration. So that's all about, you have processes, you want to constantly improve them. And again, it's not the starting point of the journey, because if you start iterating things that aren't working well, you're just going to start moving faster and pedaling faster in the wrong direction, or a direction that's not moving you closer to where you want to go. And so don't start with iteration, but once you're reasonably clear, you have processes in place, just everything you need, you can start improving these systems. And again, you don't have to do all of this perfectly in sequence, but that's where we're at in our journey, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So this quote's awesome, in part because, it's just, life is this never ending journey, or I guess it ends at some point, but along the way, you're going to grow, you're going to face obstacles, and you're going to make improvements. And hopefully along the way, you're assessing where you are so that you don't end up at that last point of life kind of regretting the decisions you made, or thinking, why did I spend so much time on this? Why did I spend so much time worrying about how this would work out, instead of really focusing on enjoying the journey, which is, the whole central theme of this course is, how do you get to where you want to go with less time and less effort? And how do you do that in a way that's really enjoyable for you? And hopefully you've come away with some key takeaways there. A couple of key concepts with iteration that really the most productive people certainly understand, but life is not a competition with the Joneses. Like, who cares who has a bigger house, or who's further along in their career at an earlier age, or, who's an even better parent than you? It's really just you and the people in your life that you care about at the end of the day. And you're just competing with becoming the best version of yourself. And so that's living by your values. It's doing what you say you're going to do. It's focusing on the things that really bring you the most kind of fulfillment along that journey. And no one can define that for you. Steph and I don't have the answers from that perspective. You got to figure out what you care about. What that is certainly different than what we may care about. And I think that's important to keep in mind, especially if you start feeling things like envy or resentment. Those are normal emotions, but just remember, you're competing with yourself, not other people. And there's always going to be someone better, faster, stronger at, some domain of life. And, you can only choose a few to compete with. Another one that we talk about a lot in the written content, but just using the power of visualization and identity to help you iterate processes. So visualization, one example of this is doing a pre-mortem or backcasting on a project. So imagine you're starting a new venture. A pre-mortem would be asking yourself, why did this fail? So you visualize that end. You get to the end, you worked hard, it failed. How do you prevent that from happening? Like, What are the things that may come up, and how do you solve those in advance? And then backcasting is thinking, imagining a future where this was successful. How did that happen? How did that come to be? What are the things that you need to do? And what are the challenges that you may have to solve? Those are things called, scenario planning, where you really think about a project ahead of time and get in front of obstacles and really double down on the things that will work. And so visualizing can be a really powerful thing in the beginning of starting something, and throughout, of course, because at the end of the day, you are competing with yourself, but you're also your own psychology. Most projects don't fail because they were horrible. They often fail or stop because you couldn't keep going. And maybe it didn't make sense for you to keep going, but there are certain times where we burn ourselves out. The other one is identity. Like, what do you tie to your identity? Are you, someone who really cares about integrity? Are you someone who really cares about constant progress and learning? Are you someone who wants to be a family person? What you tie to your identity is probably one of the most powerful and, from my perspective, underrated concepts about how you can iterate on things and really keep going over the long term. To give you a quick personal example, a few years ago, I was dabbling with surfing, and I wanted to be a surfer. I wanted to be able to get up on waves and, cruise along, and to do that in an easy way. And I was just falling off and it was horrible. And I just started kind of tying my identity to being a surfer. I moved to a place that was a surf town. I started telling people that I surfed. I went out and surfed every day. And slowly over time, I've gotten to a point where I can enjoy the sport. I'm not world class, of course, but I kind of tied my identity to it. And I did it in an intentional way, knowing that that would help me get closer to where I wanted to go. Now, that may not be an interesting goal for you, but it was just something that I wanted to personally accomplish, and identity was a big piece of that. It's now or never. So we'll introduce a rule here. There's one from Getting Things Done by David Allen, which is a good one. If something comes in your inbox and it takes 2 minutes or less to do, then do it immediately. We're going to introduce the rule of if something comes across your plate, whether it's an email or a task, and it takes 60 seconds or less, just do it then, or never do it. And get in the habit of, not letting a long list of to-dos build up, and instead just get used to taking action and really getting things off your plate. Sequential and focused action wins. This is all about kind of doing things in sequence. And, if you start a project, it's thinking about all the projects you could do. It's thinking strategically about a plan that you could do for that project, and then building in small wins along the way as you iterate, as you test hypotheses, as you figure out what works and doesn't work. As Steve Jobs says, which I take this quote to heart and even spoke at my mom's eulogy about it, like, you just can't connect the dots forward. Like, we can make educated guesses based on what's worked for other people or based on our personal experience, but a lot of times you just need to keep iterating and testing hypotheses and learning. And I spent my career as a growth marketer. This is what my career is all about. It's coming up with hypotheses, testing them in the leanest possible way, doubling down on the ones that work and cutting the ones that don't. Get used to doing that process across your life. Eat the frog is a common productivity concept, and I think it's a good one in a lot of ways. There are other ways to think about it too, but essentially it's do the hardest task that you can do first thing in the morning. There's many reasons for this. Our willpower and motivation kind of declines throughout the day. There's also some biological reasons, like in the 90-minute window, about 4 hours after you've woken up, about 3 to 5 hours actually, you are ready to do your best work kind of biologically. This isn't true for everyone, but there's many reasons why you want to do the hardest thing first thing in the morning. Another one is just the noise of the day comes in, you get distracted, etc. One way I think about this and implement it, it's not eat the frog. I don't do the hardest thing in the morning. What I think about are, what are the 3 things that I want to do today to make today successful? And we have an exercise about this as well. You could narrow that down to, what is the one thing I could do today that would make everything else that I'm doing easier or more successful, or add your list of clauses to that sentence. But really getting clear about, in a world where there's a never-ending to-do list, how do I feel good at the end of the day about what I've done? And then how do I set up a system to accomplish that? So for me personally, what's worked is the 3 actions thing. What are the 3 most important tasks? Sometimes they're work related, other times they're personal, like, do yoga or something that is aligned with my personal goals. If I accomplish those at the end of the day, even if I have more to do, I give myself the psychological relief that I accomplished what I said I was going to do, and that goes pretty far. Last 2 ideas. Extreme ownership is really important. So this is the idea that, your time and managing it is all about you. You can't blame other people for hijacking it, and certainly other people come into play, but you need to take ownership of that and build systems so that you're spending time in the ways that you want to do. And as soon as you start doing that and stop blaming external forces, things start to go a lot better for you because you focus on what you can control, you come up with solutions instead of problems, etc. This is basic personal development stuff. And you're probably like, yeah, of course, Calvin. But at the end of the day, like, this is a decision that you make to take extreme ownership. And the last thing is breaks are necessary. So, just to give you a personal anecdote, like, often if I'm kind of working on a process or something and I'm unclear about the direction, or it feels like I'm just spinning my wheels, I step away. And stepping away can mean different things. For me, it means going for a walk, going for a surf. Often it's something, getting into my body and out of my head because I can't think my way into the solution. And it may mean, taking a week off and just getting separation if you're feeling kind of on edge with coworkers or with yourself or with your spouse. Breaks can just be helpful in the iteration process because you can actually get clear about what matters and what doesn't, and maybe the solutions once you step away and your brain and subconscious start working in that way. Another idea that we've introduced throughout is this concept that there are 3 types of actions, and it's all based on this new definition of productivity that we kind of like, which is about getting more of what you want done with less time and effort. So you get clear on what you want to do and you move in that direction with less time and effort. And the way you do that is you start kind of thinking about, well, what percentage of my time is spent on productive actions, which are moving you towards where you want to go. Unproductive actions, they sort of move you circularly. They don't really move you towards or away from where you're going. And then destructive actions move you away from where you're going. What we've found is that it's actually often the unproductive actions, not the destructive ones. Of course, it depends on your situation, but that take up a lot of our time. So it's subscribing to too many newsletters. It's listening to too many podcasts. It's things that like may bring you some value, but they're ultimately not kind of moving you directly in the direction you want to go. And they're eating your time, and time is zero sum. And so time spent there means time not spent somewhere else. So we talk about kind of how you can combine unproductive and productive actions as a way of moving the percentage of things that you do towards productive actions. I'll also caveat here, life is not about being perfectly productive. Like, we're not perfectly scheduled people who are always working on the right things. Like, having time and space for serendipity is a better way to live from my perspective than just getting the most out of every inch or hour of your day. But if you're spending too much time on the unproductive and destructive buckets, even moving 10% of your activities into productive action can lead to dramatic changes across pretty much every area of your life. So task pairing is a concept that Steph loves to think about, which is how do you combine unproductive actions with productive ones? So you make a list, and we have an exercise of this, of what are the productive things that you do or don't do enough of, and the same thing with unproductive actions. And then how can you start pairing things? So, instead of just watching TV or binging Netflix because you're tired, you can certainly do that. And I have no qualms with that. But maybe sometimes you can combine exercise with watching TV, or, if you're addicted to online chess, maybe you can stream and actually build an audience and then maybe monetize that audience so that your hobby, this thing that you love, is becoming more than just a time suck. And you certainly don't have to do that either. But another one is doing errands with friends. I actually love this idea of, not bringing your friends along for boring things, but maybe you're going shopping and your friend likes interior design and they'd love to be a part of that. Like, you're creating a social experience out of doing something that otherwise would have just been an errand that may have had some productive value, but you're strengthening your relationships along the way. So this is an interesting thing to do. I think one area to look out for is you can also do this to an extreme. If you're always reading or listening to pods or whatever, combining these productive tasks with unproductive ones, you may not actually leave the space for yourself to recharge. And so, don't take this to the extreme where you need to never do anything unproductive. I think sometimes those unproductive things are completely necessary, and it's totally fine to waste time. And so this is more of a framework to just slowly nudge you towards doing things that are more productive while thinking about the unproductive things that you may just have to do because, hey, we have to do all kinds of things in life. This concept has been hard for me to personally kind of adopt in my life, although I'm getting better at it. I grew up very low income, and I think Steph is in a similar situation and would say the same thing if she's here, but finding ways to pay to save time. So I think we're all, happy to pay. Well, maybe not happy to pay, but we'll do things like pay $5 for a latte at a coffee shop, but we won't pay $5 for a tool like Calendly, or a little bit more for something like Superhuman, both of which could help us with scheduling and emails, and just dramatically reduce the amount of time we spend on things that are frustrating or not really moving us in the direction we want to go. And so paying to save time is about reframing your relationship with kind of time and money, and thinking, what's my aspirational hourly rate, a concept from Naval that we touched on in an earlier section. So, if your time is worth $200 an hour, well, maybe you should pay to save time sometimes. Examples are, paying for the highway that gets you to the place faster. It's getting a slightly more comfortable accommodation. Maybe you get extra leg room on the flight, even if it's more expensive, because you're not as miserable and then don't have to invest in going to a chiropractor. Maybe it's paying to have someone fix something for you, even if you could fix it yourself. Another thing is just healthy, ready-made meals. Instead of, yes, cooking your meals could be the best way to achieve a healthy meal at a low cost, but there's services that will deliver meals to you for $7, like a pretty good healthy one. Maybe it's worth, paying for that sometimes. And then, there's endless kind of things where you could pay to save time here. And we have lots of ideas on the slide, but also in the course. The general principle, though, is getting used to the idea that your time is valuable and you should put probably some sort of monetary value on that, and that naturally we're not inclined to do these things. We might think they're excess, and that's at least been my personal experience, where I think of myself as a frugal person and didn't come from a lot of means, and so it's been hard to adjust to some of these things. But slowly over time, I've been adapting to the luxury of being able to pay to save time, and that ultimately frees up your mind, it frees up your time, and it allows you to do the things that you actually care about, instead of saving a few extra dollars when you potentially don't need that. Just to wrap up this section, iteration, as we've talked about before, sequentially, it should come after elimination, automation, and delegation. And that's because you don't want to iterate things that you could eliminate, which means you'd be iterating on a process that you don't even need, that you could automate, which means that a tool or code can do this for you, or delegation, that another person could do this for you. So lots of people jump to iteration. It's just the common thing within productivity. It's the focus on efficiency, which is just moving faster without really thinking about where you're moving or what you're doing, instead of effectiveness, which is doing the right things. And so if you're reasonably sure you're doing effective things, think about how to iterate. Because it's not something that is a step change in your productivity, you don't want to focus too much on iteration, because there's going to be marginal returns. Like, you can only bend time so much. You can significantly improve some processes, and you'd be surprised if you really go out and experiment. And if you haven't seen something, or if you've been in the weeds for a while, you'd be shocked kind of the improvements you can make, maybe with a fresh set of eyes, or either from you or someone else. But at the end of the day, like, you can only improve something so much, and you'll actually get much more value out of your time if you completely eliminate it because it's not valuable for what you want, or you start leveraging automation to the machine, or delegation to a person. The hardest part in iteration, and so I think this applies most to project management and really getting things off the ground and iterating and scaling them, is managing your own personal psychology. And so you need to find ways to kind of manage yourself over time, and to work in sustainable ways, and not just put your head down every time there's a problem, and keep grinding and grinding and grinding until you can no longer continue with a project that maybe would have really served to have you there longer. And we have a big section on that. And so I encourage you to check out the project management section, because we've downloaded a lot of our knowledge about working with startups and getting things off the ground. And I think there's a lot of cool ideas there about managing your psychology. Leveraging gamification, visualization, identity. We talked about visualization and identity to hack your psychology. So this is, thinking to the end of a project. Why was it successful? Why did it fail? And then getting in front of those things. Identity is, who are you and who do you want to be? And what does that mean? for reducing decision fatigue. Like, are you a person that is high integrity? You always do what you say you're going to do? If so, that makes a lot of decisions really easy in the moment, and you don't make these short-term trade-offs just because they're easier. Gamification is another one where you can just set up little games. Like, imagine, you know, you want to learn how to do yoga. Well, set up a little game with yourself where you send reminders, and as you get to the next level of doing yoga and you hit certain milestones, you get certain rewards for that. There's all kinds of ways you can gamify things in your life, and it may seem pointless, and in some ways it is, but it's really just a hack for your psychology and thinking about, you know, how can I get the most out of me knowing how I'm motivated. And I think this works really well for some people, and certainly works in businesses and products as well. Lots of products use gamification. The last thing is the best hacks don't look like hacks. So this idea of paying to return your time. So, you know, paying to have something done. That doesn't look like a form of iteration. It doesn't look like a productivity hack, but it certainly is, because especially if it has effects like recharging you, or freeing up your time to really do things that you enjoy that may recharge you, or even, you know, allowing you to like sleep more so that you have the energy. These things can be really worth it, because what happens when you sleep more? You feel more energy throughout the day. You're less reactive. You're more pleasant to your partner. You're more patient. There's all of these downstream effects, and maybe just paying an hour of something that is taking up your time every day, and these could be different things, would serve you really well just by helping you get more sleep. And start thinking about it from that perspective instead of, oh, I have to spend $50 on this. Well, would you pay $50 to be a better partner, to be more patient with your colleagues, and so on? I think I would. And I think that's one way to start thinking about these things. So inside this last chapter, there are a few exercises, as with any of the chapters. So we'll talk about how can you pair different tasks, how can you identify what's not working, how can you make meetings better? I mean, how many meetings are just awful, and why is that? And how can you start improving that over time? And that may require you to work with other people too. And then there's a few tutorials as well. Up next, we don't have videos on this, but this is our last chapter recording. We have some bonuses. So we have shortcuts that you can use on the computer. Me and Steph are big shortcut people. These are like micro optimizations, but they can help over time. We have a tool directory. Then we have a bunch of templates on things like, you know, hiring a VA, goal setting, Pomodoro sessions, and, you know, project planning. There's a bunch of different things there, and some of them are covered throughout the course, but go ahead and check out those bonus sections as well, in addition to the templates, because there's lots of great stuff there too. And hopefully we'll add to that over time. I think we also have a list of books as well that you can check out if you want to go deep on specific topics. And I think that's it for now. I hope you have enjoyed these overview videos, and maybe we'll get Steph on here and re-record it at some point in case you guys really want to hear from her on this topic. But really dive into the content, start taking action on things. And if you're listening to this before you've engaged with any of the fundamentals, iteration, delegation, or automation, please go back to those sessions and just take a look there, see if there's anything, because I think when you start to iterate, you don't get as much out of this course. And that's what we want. We want to add a value to you. It's not about how you live. It's about helping you get to wherever you want to go. And there's nothing prescriptive about that. It's just trying to give you the tools and the mindsets, et cetera, to get there. So I hope you enjoyed our overviews, and please reach out to us on any of our channels and give feedback so we can keep improving this and making more valuable over time. All right, until the next session.